Well, hello and welcome to Being Catholic Media. I'm glad you have joined us. Well, for those of you who have been following us online, know that we are doing a lot of stuff on the divine will. And today we're joined again with Kathy Herstick to share more on the divine will and about Luisa herself and her birthplace called Corato. So hello and welcome. Great to have you today, Kathy, again.
Thanks, Carol. Nice to be with you again.
Yeah, we're here to share about the birthplace of Luisa and the trips that you've had there. And I guess the experience that you came away with while visiting, because you had said to me before we started this interview that really a lot of people don't touch on the birthplace of Luisa and what it's like out there. So I thought we'd maybe have a chat today a bit about that and again, share your experiences.
Yeah, Carol, so thanks for inviting me back. As you know, I'm just back from Corato, but the first time I went, it was 1998. And I was celebrating my 50th birthday that year. And we had the anniversary here in Medjugorje, the 25th of June. And just like this year, the sisters, the Benedictine daughters of the Divine Will, they like to come to Medjugorje for the anniversary if they can. And in 1998, they came for that anniversary and they were speaking to us about becoming an oblate. Okay. So this was the first time I heard about becoming an oblate in the Divine Will. And I was very interested. So as usual, I like to start everything on the first of the month. So the sisters mentioned about becoming an oblate, but we were busy with guests in the house. So I decided on the 1st of July, I would sign the form that they had given us to become an oblate. Mm-hmm. And you make a commitment to read the volumes for 30 minutes every day. So I was going to make this commitment to read the volumes every day for 30 minutes.
So maybe Kathy, there are people who have never heard of that word oblate. So that means that you give your time and you devote yourself to a specific task. And in your case, it was giving yourself over to the divine will, practicing it more. And I just say giving 30 minutes a day to practice and listen to Louisa's writings and read them. Is that right?
Yeah. So as a lay person, you know, you can become like Luisa was third order Dominican, because that was what was promoted in her own parish at the time. So third order Dominican. So now the family of Divine Will, the monks and the nuns, you can become an oblate. So it's like joining the Divine Will family, and then you share in their prayers. It's a bit, in Ireland, we have the Legion of Mary. So you can share in the prayers of the Legion of Mary, even if you're not an active member.
Yes.
So even if you're not a monk or a nun, you can share in the prayers and get the graces, you know, coming from the monks and the nuns who are doing all the prayers. And I really felt a big effect of becoming an oblate. In fact, as I went on to explain, so my friends were here for the anniversary as well, and they kept pestering me about going somewhere for my birthday. So my 50th birthday was in July, and one of my friends, we shared the same birthday, the same day. So she wanted to go somewhere as well. And they kept suggesting different places like Lisieux or Our Lady's House in Turkey. And I said to them, but I don't want to travel very far. I'm happy in Medjugorje and I don't want to go on a longer journey. So then my friend who shares a birthday with me said, what about Corato? And she's not actually learning about Divine Will, but she knew I would be interested. So I said, well, I've never looked on a map to see where Corato is. I've been learning about Divine Will and I don't even know where Corato is. So I looked it up and here it is right beside Bari. And it's very easy from Medjugorje to go down to Dubrovnik and maybe get the ferry over to Bari. And Corato is a short distance away. So I thought that's very doable. That's something I could do. So the next thing was, how was I going to get there? Was there a ferry or a flight? So the ferries were all booked out. And it was the time of the World Cup when Croatia were playing France in the final. So Croatia were getting through each match and there was a lot of excitement in Medjugorje. So my husband, he said he could only go for 3 or 4 days, you know, and there was no ferry and there didn't seem to be any direct schedule flight. But because I was searching on my phone at the last minute, the search came up saying trip from Bari to trip from Dubrovnik to Bari but I'd have to go for 7 days. So then I said to my husband, would it be okay to go for 7 days? And he said, I can't go for 7 days, but you go for 7 days. And in the end, my friend flew over from Ireland and we were able to celebrate our birthdays together in Corato. So she flew from Dublin to Bari and I flew from Dubrovnik to Bari and we met up in Corato. So
Lovely.
That was the first time I went there. So it was a miracle that the flights came in the first, because I said to my husband, I said, it has to be around 100 euros. I had all these conditions, you know, it has to be at this time. It has to be around this price. And that's exactly what came in the end. It was around 100 euros return. And everything just fell into place. So like really quickly, I signed the form the 1st of July. And by the 10th of July, I was in Corato. In 10 days of becoming an oblate, I was in Corato. So the next thing was so to go to Corato is pretty easy from Bari Airport. So you fly to Bari Airport. The train station is actually in the airport. You get on the train and within 30 minutes, you're in Corato.
Oh, wow. So it's easy to get to.
It's easy to get to. The last stage was to get off the train and get on a bus. And as we came into Corato, then I saw the sign for the Luisa Piccarreta Association, got off the bus, followed the sign, 5 minutes, I'm in the association, which was located right beside the church. So here I am, right beside Louisa's body in the church. And I was saying to Carol that it really makes everything real when you see her body in the church beside the main altar. And then I happened to arrive at the one time in the year that they do a novena to Our Lady who's in the church there where Louisa's body is. She's Our Lady of the Greeks. Wow. This miraculous image that appeared on a piece of wood. And she's the patron of Corato, but they only take her image out for 9 days in the year when the novena is going on. And I arrived there for 7 of those days. All that. Who can plan all that, that you arrive at the novena that's going on to Our Lady, you know?
Talk about a birthday gift on your 50th birthday. This is incredible, right? This really is just incredible. Amazing. Yeah. Bear with us, folks.
And Carol, you know the other thing as well, when the novena is going on, they keep the church open. At another time in the year, if I went there, the church would be closed all day probably. But because the novena is going on, I was able to go in to the tomb of Louisa and spend all the time in the church. But in a normal period, the church would be closed. I wouldn't get that opportunity.
Yes. So tell us, Callie, about, you know, the tomb of Louisa. Is her tomb opened? Is it closed? What's it like?
No. Yeah, it's a marble structure. So the first time I went there, Louisa was buried in the church, but towards the back of the church. And there was a marble kind of marble, how would you say, slab on the side, just explaining that Louisa was buried here, but that was towards the back of the church. Right. So since 1998, Louisa has been moved to the front of the church beside the main altar. So they got permission to move her body right beside the altar. And I think I was reading in the volumes at one stage that Jesus said that Louisa would be on his left or something. And that's exactly where she is in the church. So that's where she is on the earth. But I think he said in heaven that she'll be in the same position, you know?
Yeah.
So it just makes it so real, you know. Yes. When somebody doesn't want to learn about the teachings and you go to the church and everything is in obedience to the church and her body is right up beside the altar. She's a servant of God, but she's in total, you know, everything is in total obedience to the teachings of the church. And the local bishop is totally happy with, you know, her cause is fine. And, you know, it's regrettable sometimes when you hear people giving wrong information, like that there's something wrong, or because everything is fine in Corato and we go there to learn about the teachings. And just this week, didn't we say that even Saint Faustina confirms everything that Louisa is telling us as well? So Saint Faustina is an approved saint of the church, and she uses the word living hosts, but Louisa used the same term, and actually living in the will of God. Saint Faustina also puts it that way, to live in the will of God. But who
Yeah.
could plan that trip, Carol? That's what I'm saying. In 10 days of becoming an oblate, I was in Corato. I got to know the people in the association, and they make it more real to you. You go to Louisa's room where she spent most of her
Oh my
life. You see
goodness.
the balcony where she looked down with
I
Jesus,
saw
yes,
Christ,
carrying his cross, asking for help. And, you know, it just makes all the writings come alive for you, really, you know?
Obviously, you know, when you read Louisa's writings, and obviously you can see online where she stayed in bed, this beautiful white bed. It was, you know, from the 1800s. And, you know, I can imagine what it's like actually physically seeing her bed where she was. And Kathy, she was in, just for those maybe who don't know much about Louisa, she was in her bed for how many years?
So from the age of 18, 19, you know, coming into her 20s, she was
18,
confined to
19, and
bed
then
from then
until
on.
she was
Yeah,
80,
so like 60 years, you know.
60 years, and she lived off the Eucharist, wasn't that right?
She lived in, yeah, so the priest would come to her room for 5 o'clock mass every morning. And there's like a little wardrobe that you open up, and that was his little altar. So you see all this, Carol, you see her little bed and the simple altar and the crucifix where he had the mass every morning at 5 o'clock. And if he didn't bless Louisa, she wouldn't be able to function, you know. Yes. She was stiff.
That's right.
And then he had to bless her hands for her to react, you know. And
yes, and you know, in her writings, it says that, you know, she was very rigid and she couldn't move, and until the priest came in, she wasn't able to do anything or speak. And again, you reminded us in our last interview that this confirms the authority of the priest. You know, unless the priest had that time with Louisa and administered the Eucharist to her, she couldn't do anything.
Yeah, and the value of the priest's blessing. So since I'm in Divine Will now, everything is about asking the priest for his blessing. And then that's what the Mass is. We get the priest's blessing at the Mass, you know?
Yes, yes.
That's why my whole thing in Divine Will now, it's okay, if you love Jesus, you must go to the Holy Mass.
Yes.
You know, people who are staying away from the Mass, the Mass is the summit of everything, you know, and you get
it is the apex of everything. Friends, yeah. I just mentioned earlier on, we are having some technical difficulties here because Kathy is all the way over there in Medjugorje. We're middle of the day where I'm sure many internet users are coming online. So do bear with us if things seem to be coming in and out. It's just, these are the things that we cannot help. So Kathy, how many times have you been there since your first trip?
So the first time I was there, I left the day just before Our Lady's Feast Day. So Our Lady's Feast Day is the 18th of July each year. So I left on the 17th of July. And then I was determined the next year to go back. So I went back the next year with my husband. This was before COVID. And because we know in the Divine Will, the sisters are the Benedictine sisters of the Divine Will. So the second time I went there, my husband rented a car and I got to see the body of Saint Benedict and Saint Scholastica.
Oh
I got to
goodness.
see Saint Philomena. I got to see Saint Gerard Magellan. We had a wonderful trip and we saw so many places. And then the other thing that's important, Carol, is to go to San Giovanni Rotondo, because Padre Pio is really involved in Divine Will.
Yes.
We know from the book, The Son of My Will, that when people would come from Louisa's place, he would say, why are you coming up to me? You have an angel in Corato. Why are you not going to Louisa? So, and I would be a spiritual child of Padre Pio. And this same friend who came to Corato with me the first time, we went to San Giovanni together in the 90s.
Wow.
And a week before I went, I had just met my husband. I didn't know he was going to become my husband, but a week before I went, I had just met him and I felt that San Giovanni was all about marriage. And when I came back, then I did, in fact, marry my husband. So Padre Pio was a big part of that. And he's a big part now. My friend Kathy, she's the same name as I have.
Oh, goodness.
And we both became spiritual children the first time we went there, signed the book and became spiritual children of Padre Pio. And this is all part of Divine Will as well, because Padre Pio wants us, as it says in The Son of My Will, the first prayer group really was set up in San Giovanni Rotondo, and he wanted, and there is still a Divine Will center teaching about Divine Will in San Giovanni Rotondo. So every time we go to Corato, as part of my trip, I go there as well to Padre Pio's place.
And you recently shared with us What we might do is on the back of this video, we will share those photographs that you have of the body of St. Padre Pio and, you know, the tomb of Luisa. I'm sure our viewers would be keen to see those beautiful images that you sent to us. So have you found then that since you visited this birthplace of Luisa, that you experienced many graces in your life, or?
So just look at the progress, Carol. So this year when I went, we set up a prayer group here in Medjugorje. Then we prayed for a spiritual director who came along. And now this year, the third time we went as a little group with their spiritual director, there was 5 of us. And I had that feeling the first time I went to Corato that there might be pilgrimages coming here, you know? And so here's the third year now. And as a prayer group, 5 of us going with their spiritual director, who was able to say mass during the novena to Our Lady, because we went for the same time when the novena was on. And then the local priest invited him to come back next year, you know, as the priest said, he got a public invitation to come back next year. And then we went on to San Giovanni as well, and our priest said mass there. And our priest's name is Father Michael. So he got to say mass in St. Michael's Cave, which is another important place to go to as well. And it just worked out perfectly. So it's the progression of, you know, learning about divine will and how we're going forward now with our own priest, you know, who's blessing us. So the first 2 trips, there was no priest. Now this trip, we had our own priest and we had our own mass.
It's the birth of something. It's the birth of something new. Is it easy to get to from Europe? I know I had never heard of this place until I guess I came across Luisa. Is it easy to get to from say Ireland or the UK, or is it, I don't know if you know, if there's direct flights, Kathy, or not?
There is, Carol. So as we were waiting for our flights to come back to Croatia, there was 2 flights going to London. So obviously there's a lot of flights going to Bari from the UK. Yes. And also Ryanair flight to Bari from Dublin as well. Sometimes it's expensive in the summertime from Ireland. Yes. But then in October, there's cheap flights. So later on, at the right time, there's very affordable flights. And as I say, either if you get a taxi from the airport to Corato or if you get the train, it's not expensive. And even from Corato to get to San Giovanni, we got the local bus.
Well, you can get a bus.
You can go on the bus or the train. We got the local bus.
How amazing.
Up to San Giovanni. Then in San Giovanni, we got a local bus out to St. Michael's Cave and back. So there's a bus station there and you just inquire about the time. So the bus brings you out, the bus brings you back, and it's not so expensive.
Wow. And tell me, is Corato a small town? What's it like? Is it similar to Medjugorje? It would be
bigger than Medjugorje. So it's important to stay around the center. The churches there's a lot of churches, Carol. So when we go in July, we're over there for the feast of Our Lady of Mount Carmel.
Wow.
So my friend and I, we had a special friend here in Medjugorje, and her name was Anne-Marie. She came out as a young person from Ireland to stay here for a while. And she actually got sick then in Medjugorje and returned home. She got an illness, but she dedicated her whole life to promoting Medjugorje. She couldn't work anymore, but she spent her whole day praying for priests, helping out the Medjugorje Association in Ireland.
Wow.
She was a bit like Luisa. Her body didn't really function, but her fingers functioned and her brain was fine. And she used to use that for doing the internet, because the older people in the council didn't know much about the internet at the time. And Anne-Marie was a young person and she did all their work on the internet for the Medjugorje Council. And my friend Kathy, she said, when we walked into Luisa's house, the first year we went in 1998, it immediately came to her head that I think Anne-Marie is a victim soul, which she was, you know. She was a bit like Luisa, like, you know, she was very limited in her body. And she said, that came into her head in Luisa's room, I think our friend Anne-Marie is a victim soul. And we were there on the Feast of Mount Carmel. We got the message to say that Anne-Marie had just died.
Oh.
But, you know, in divine will, Luisa tells us that God has to have about, we'll say the number is 10, but it's like a little bit more, a little bit less, victim souls in the world who are keeping the world going with their prayers. So Luisa at some stage says that she was aware of other victim souls in the world in different countries, and she actually mentions the countries. So she mentions these people who are victim souls. So these people are praying all the time, you know, they can't work in a normal way, and their whole life is just prayer and sacrifice for the rest of the world. But that happened the first time we went, that she just died then on the feast of Our Lady of Mount Carmel.
Bless her. So Kathy, where did you stay when you were there? Did you stay in a hotel or?
So actually the Luisa Piccarreta Association can arrange accommodation. They're good people to get in contact with. They're on the internet, and they can answer emails in English. There's a lady there who speaks English, and they can arrange accommodation. Or we stayed in a place, it's right beside the church, La Demora. The Benedictine sisters told me about it, so it's very close to the church and very, very nice to stay there and go to the church all the time, you know. But so actually, Louisa's house is closed at the moment, and the association are staying up in the convent. So for 10 years of her life, Louisa, her spiritual director, asked her to move in with, he set up a religious community, the Daughters of Divine Zeal, and he asked Louisa to stay with the nuns, that they would learn from Louisa. So she spent 10 years really with them. So now the association are located in the convent where Louisa stayed. And when Louisa died, they turned her room into the altar, you know, where Louisa used to have her bed in the convent. Now it's actually the altar of the chapel there.
So why is there...
Anyone visiting at the moment can't actually see her house, but they can see her bed and all the different things up in the convent. So we went there this time, we visited the convent.
Okay, so you can't actually go to her home now, you can only go to the convent.
It's been renovated, so it probably won't be ready until next year.
Yeah. Okay. So you would encourage people then to go to
Corato,
excuse me, to go to Corato.
Yeah, so the other people in our prayer group, so we have a little prayer group now, and it just makes it so real for you, you know, when you're reading all the writings, and it just makes it real when you see the place where she lived, the church that, you know, she went to when she was younger, and it just makes it all real, you know. And so in Medjugorje we have Father Slavko, the priest who died at the top of Cross Mountain, and we go to his grave. So there's something special about going to the grave of a saint, and Our Lady tells us in one of the messages that Father Slavko is interceding for us in heaven. So, you know, in Medjugorje you're encouraged to go to his grave and bring your intentions there, and Our Lady's telling us he's interceding in heaven. So that's what I'm saying, it is important to go to the grave of the person.
Yeah, and you know, Kathy, while you're operating in that divine will, things just seem to fall into place, because really that's, as you said in your previous interview, this is a perfect formula. And when we operate in the divine will, God will assist us in our daily lives, will assist us in everything that we're doing, all of these acts we're doing, whether it's booking holidays, whether it's booking pilgrimages, whatever it is that we're doing. When we invite the Lord into it, things will happen.
Exactly, Carol. It's so perfect. That's what I would say. The will of God is so perfect for me now.
Yes.
And it just all happens because you have this openness to it. Like before, you would go against it or be closed. But when you have this openness to the will of God, you just see it in action, you know, and then it's so easy. You know that you can trust it. So it's so easy to be open to it. But if you don't know this information, you can go against it. You know, you don't know if you can trust it. But now we're told, you know, that you can trust it. And the more you trust it, then the more perfect it is, you know.
And I think sometimes, you know, if you look as, you know, what's going on in our world and how challenging life can be at times, but the divine will brings everything together. It brings the Mass together, the Eucharist together, the Gospel together. Because ultimately, if we look throughout the Gospel, it's laced with the divine will. It's just only now maybe that we're putting a name to it, or we're recognizing it now. So it's you know, now seems to be just the perfect timing for us to know more and to delve more into knowing more about this beautiful gift that we have been given, because like I say, it just brings everything together. It's the apex, as I said before, it's that icing on the cake, and we're just very grateful to be able to doing more on it. And please God, again, moving forward, bringing even more content on Luisa herself and more about the divine will. So thank you, Kathy, for sharing about the birthplace and for me getting it right, Corato, instead of Katona. So again, my apologies for that. So again, thank you for joining me today in Medjugorje. It's very hot in Scotland. What's it like over there?
Yeah, it's very hot in Medjugorje as well.
Yeah,
so that's the thing, Carol. I really encourage anybody who can to go and visit Corato and visit the association. And the people in the association have great information, and you really learn a lot. Any pilgrimage you go on, you learn a lot. But to take that time out, people who are serious about divine will, and if you get the chance to go and visit and go to San Giovanni as well as part of the trip.
And you see,
it's very doable.
You're hitting two birds with one stone there. You're getting access to these. Padre Pio, one of the greatest saints of our church, getting to see his body, who's totally incorrupt. And then again, visiting where Luisa was and is also a great gift to us. So again, thank you, Kathy. I want to encourage you, if you can get to this beautiful place, please do. I'm going to try maybe next year. And when we get past this year, I may go over and see, instead of maybe a trip to Medjugorje, I might go and see Luisa's birthplace. So again, thank you, Kathy.
Thank you, Carol.
And I'm sure we'll be talking again. Until next time, bye for now.
God bless, Carol. Bye-bye.